Welcome back to the Expert's Edge. As a diehard travel junkie, I'm always looking for my next thrilling international adventure, but with danger lurking around every corner, I have to be careful which countries I visit. Trust me, I've made some dicey destination choices over the years that nearly got me killed, kidnapped, or thrown in jail. So to save you from making the same near-fatal mistakes I did, I've compiled a list of the most perilous places on Earth that we Americans should avoid at all costs. From drug cartel hotspots to war-torn disaster zones, these countries are not for the faint of heart. But if you're an adrenaline-chasing risk-taker like me, you might just find these dangerous destinations tempting. Just don't say I didn't warn you that vacationing in these spots could be the last trip you ever take. The most dangerous countries for American travelers. As an American, there are some places in the world where merely stepping off the plane could be the last thing you ever do. These nations are hazardous for citizens of the good old USA, so unless you have a death wish, avoid them like expired hummus. Take Syria, for instance. There's a civil war that's been raging for nearly a decade, with more sides than a D20. You'll never know who's firing at you, be it rebel forces, terrorist cells, or the Syrian military. According to the State Department, no part of Syria is safe from violence. I'd rather vacation in Chernobyl. Syria tops the danger charts, for obvious reasons. This war-torn nation has been embroiled in a messy civil war for nearly a decade now, with various factions battling each other and anyone else who gets in the way. As an American, you'd be an ideal target for terrorists and insurgents alike. The State Department warns, no part of Syria is safe from violence, kidnappings by armed groups, arbitrary arrests, and the use of chemical warfare. Hard pass. How about Yemen? It's a hellscape with terrorist groups running amok, constant fighting between Houthi rebels and government forces, life-threatening diseases, and landmines strewn about like discarded candy wrappers. Yemen's enduring unrest, civil war, health risks, kidnappings, landmines, and terrorism make it perilous. Protests in 2011 spiraled into violence, and government forces opened fire on pro-democracy activists, killing 50. Even journalists know to steer clear of Yemen unless they want to end up dead. As the State Department warns, do not travel to Yemen due to terrorism, civil unrest, health risks, kidnappings, armed conflict, and landmines. Yemen is a Middle Eastern gem I'd steer clear of, unless you fancy dodging airstrikes, suicide bombings, and landmines. What was once a hub of tourism is now a humanitarian crisis of epic proportions. The pro-democracy uprising of 2011 descended into civil war, creating a power vacuum that allowed Al-Qaeda and ISIS to gain ground. Journalists and aid workers are frequently kidnapped or killed. So as a casual tourist, you wouldn't stand a chance. Feeling adventurous? Then Mali is for you. Just kidding. Violent crime dominates daily life in Mali, from kidnappings and robberies to terrorist attacks that strike without warning. Corruption is rampant, and you can't trust the police. The FAA even prohibits U.S. air carriers from flying into Mali's capital due to safety risks. In short, Syria, Yemen, and Mali should be on your no-fly list. As an American abroad, they are hazardous to your health and likelihood of returning home alive. But don't just take my word for it. Check the State Department's travel advisories and warnings before booking that trip. Your life depends on it. In Syria, there's been a bloody civil war raging for nearly a decade with multiple factions vying for power. You never know who's shooting at whom, but there's a good chance they'll shoot at you too, American infidel. Mali's no picnic either, with violent crimes like kidnappings, robberies, and terrorist attacks being commonplace, especially around the capital. As an intrepid world traveler, I've been to some dicey places, but even I know better than to visit the countries on the State Department's Do Not Travel list. What makes these nations so hazardous? Let's just say you'll want to avoid unrest, violence, theft, and general mayhem on your vacay. Iraq has ongoing terrorist attacks, kidnappings, and armed conflict. Anti-US militias threaten Westerners, and bombings are frequent even in Baghdad. Journalists risk harassment and death reporting in South Sudan, where armed conflict and cattle raids often lead to violence. Weapons are easy to come by, so armed robberies and other violent crimes prevail. Venezuela, once a vibrant nation, has deteriorated into political and economic chaos. Hyperinflation has caused the currency to become nearly worthless, while shortages of food, medicine, and other necessities have led to a refugee crisis and widespread malnutrition. The authoritarian regime violently cracks down on any dissent, and protests are often deadly. As an American, You may be labeled a spy or enemy of the state. Need I say more? Some other delightfully dangerous destinations on the State Department's Do Not Travel list include Afghanistan, North Korea, and Somalia. My advice? Stick to the resorts and save these spots for Call of Duty. Your life is worth more than an exciting vacation story. The reasons these nations top the danger list are manifold: war and civil unrest, violent crime, terrorism, corruption, and instability. As an American wanderer, your life could be at risk in any of these countries. My advice? Save your wanderlust for destinations where you're less likely to be assaulted, kidnapped, bombed, or caught in crossfire. Your life is worth more than an exciting anecdote, no? Some countries just aren't made for tourism, especially if you're an American like me. According to the State Department's ominous travel advisories, there are a few spots on the globe so perilous that U.S. citizens should avoid them altogether. As your personal travel agent, I highly advise not booking tickets to any of these places unless you have a death wish and too much money to burn. Here are some tips for staying safe when visiting high-risk destinations. Listen, I get the appeal of dangerous destinations. There's something thrilling about going where most tourists fear to tread, but a fun vacation can quickly become deadly if you're not careful. As someone who's traveled to over 50 countries, some of which my mom still doesn't know about, here are a few tips I've picked up to avoid becoming a cautionary tale. First, do your research. Read travel advisories from places like the State Department to find out which parts of the country to avoid completely. Once you've narrowed down where you want to go, read reviews from recent visitors. They'll clue you in on the latest scams and security issues so you can be on guard. When you land, don't advertise that you're American or wealthy. Dress conservatively, avoid flashy logos, and don't flash expensive cameras or jewelry around. You might as well wear a "Kidnap Me" sign. Also, be wary of unsolicited help from new friends. As welcoming as the locals seem, some may view tourists as easy targets. Move around with purpose, and avoid being alone if possible. Walk confidently like you know where you're going, even if you have no clue. Criminals target those who look lost or vulnerable. If exploring solo, consider group tours. There's safety in numbers. But don't get lulled into a false sense of security in a crowd either. Pickpockets and thieves prowl busy tourist sites. Finally, have an exit strategy. Know how to quickly get out of dangerous situations. Have cash and small bills, copies of important documents, and a plan for contacting help if needed. An adventure is only fun when you make it out alive with all your organs and belongings intact. Following these tips won't guarantee your safety, but they'll help ensure your dangerous destination experience is memorable for the right reasons. Stay alert, trust your instincts, and get ready for an adventure you'll be bragging about for years to come, if you survive. So you want to visit one of the world's most perilous places, do you? Look, I get the appeal of extreme adventure travel. The adrenaline rush of narrowly escaping certain death is a real thrill. But these countries are dangerous for a reason. The odds of you becoming a hostage, getting blown up, shot, or kidnapped are pretty high. As someone who values staying alive and intact, I have to ask, why do you want to go to Syria, Yemen, or Venezuela? Is your life not exciting enough? Do you secretly hate yourself? I mean, there are safer ways to spice up your life, like base jumping, running with the bulls, or dating my ex. All jokes aside, if you insist on going to one of these high-risk hellholes, do your research. Check government warnings from the US, UK, Canada, and Australia. See what they say about terrorism, crime, disease, natural disasters, and civil unrest. Their advice may just save your life. Learn about cultural norms so you don't unintentionally offend anyone. Dress conservatively. Avoid political demonstrations. Don't flash valuables. Consider hiring an armed security detail. And for the love of all that's good, purchase high-quality travel insurance in case you need emergency evacuation or have to bribe corrupt officials. Bottom line, these countries can be deadly, especially for Americans and Westerners. But if you go in with your eyes open, connect with locals, exercise extreme caution, and stay flexible, you might make it out unscathed. Personally, I'd rather just watch a documentary. But you do you. Just promise me you'll be careful. The world needs more adventure seekers, just not dead ones. So there you have it, folks. The most perilous places on Earth for us. Freedom-loving, burger-eating Americans. Sure, a jaunt through inner-city Mogadishu or a stroll along the DMZ might seem tempting for adventure. But don't say I didn't warn you. Maybe stick to a nice all-inclusive resort in Cancun this year. At least the biggest danger there is running out of sunscreen. But if you must see the world's danger zones, make sure your travel insurance is paid up and you have your will in order. And definitely don't wear that tacky Hawaiian shirt. It'll make you an even bigger target. Stay safe out there, and happy travels.